Very good evening, warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine. Thank you for joining us and welcome to a week in which we celebrate three people who are doing some pretty cool stuff, which is a rather nice segue out of last Thursday's show. And thank you for the feedback we got. We got plenty of it. And in particular, people were looking out for the wines of Wildeburg. And it was one of the points we made on the show. Christian Eads talking about how the prescient reports with Wine Mag serve as a talent spotting contest as much as anything. So many of these slightly smaller brands popping up and delivering really good wine. People maybe haven't heard of them, and Wildeburg is one of those. So I think JD is going to be seeing plenty of trade, and brisk trade at that, as a result. Some super wine too, from de Grendel, from Kleine Zolze, from Ogderak, from Cavalli, just a really good selection. And also some lovely wine from Strandveld, and in that case, a Syrah. And that's the other thing that's come up from a lot of people, just shifting perceptions on what Shiraz/Syrah can be in South Africa. The days of it just being a bigger, stronger, bolder, warmer climate kind of wine have moved along quite considerably. And there's now so much wine, such as that Syrah out of Strandveld, the LM Syrah from de Grendel. That's a different style and very, very welcome for it. So that was last week. This week we have got quite a collection. We've got a film star on the show. We've got a national treasure, and we've got one of the quiet heroes of the Durbanville wine area who've all been involved in some pretty cool and new productions. So we chat to all three of them in just a moment. Before we do that, though, here's your Monday evening wine news. All right, this is a reminder. Next Tuesday, the 30th of May, if you are in London, or if you've got friends who are in London who you would like to include, please send this their way. We've got the last few seats available. This is dinner with me and the Nickel Foundation in support of Laureus Sport for Good and the incredible work that the foundation does, especially here in South Africa. And it is a chance to drink plenty of really good South African wine, have a couple of fantastic steaks at High Timber, the restaurant owned by Gary and Kathy Jordan and Aline Strauss on the banks of the Thames, and to just celebrate a really cool evening of South African indulgence. There'll be some familiar faces. Sean Fitzpatrick, the All Black great captain, will be along with us amongst a few others. There'll be an auction at the end of the evening, and it should be a terrific night. So come along, info at dannickel.co.za if you'd like to come along, and we would love to see you there next Tuesday at High Timber. Now, these are some tastings. A very busy man is Michael Fridjon. He spent all of last week tasting away. That was for the Trophy Wine Show with Investec. I spent some time there, and coming up on the show in the next couple of weeks, your chance to watch a conversation I had with Jancis Robinson, which was fascinating. Now, once all of that is done, the Reciprocal team will now be hard at work with some tastings, and you can join them either the 25th of May, that's this Thursday, from 4:30 till 7 at Reciprocal's offices in Parktown in Johannesburg. Alternatively, you can join them at Culture Wine Bar on the 1st of June. That's next Thursday, and it's 275 Rand a ticket. But if you buy 1,500 Rand or more worth of wine, then that price of the ticket will come off it. So you're effectively getting a nice discount. Look out for wines like Bodegas Piedra, Bodegas Gerardo Mendes, Signora Rosa, Gauchezo, Chapel Downs, and some champagne as well. There'll be Forger Brumont Blanc de Blanc Premier Cru on arrival, 275 Rand. That's a pretty good night out with Reciprocal, Johannesburg and Cape Town. Not many tickets left though, so get booking. All right, so there are a couple of things to look out for in Johannesburg, in Cape Town, and in London. Also look out for some really exciting wine that has come onto the market of late, that has arrived in the Dan Really Likes Wine cellar. One of them is the latest edition of a collaborative Sauvignon Blanc effort, where the assorted wineries of Durbanville have come together and created a wine that they feel reflects the broader Durbanville Sauvignon Blanc space. And Morgan Steyn is the winemaker of this particular wine. He's the assistant winemaker at Grendel, and together with Charles Hopkins is delivering some terrific wine, as I mentioned, with that Elam Syrah a little earlier on in the show. So Morgan joins us. So too does Charles Back, one of the greats of South African winemaking. And he's got one of the coolest named wines, which has some pretty awesome wine to it, in the form of the Chakalaka. And the latest one has just arrived. So we celebrate that with Charles. And then we raise a glass to my fellow Zimbabwean, Marlvin Gwese, one of the stars. He's the movie star I was speaking of, one of the stars of Blind Ambition, the sommelier movie about the quartet of Zimbabweans that wowed not just the wine world, but I think the world as a whole. It was a beautiful piece of filmmaking, a wonderful story, and a great tribute to four people, one of whom has just got a new job. So let's kick off with that as we say a warm welcome to Marlvin, to Morgan, and to Charles. Guys, lovely to have all of you on the show, and thank you very much for joining us and kicking off our week on such a high note. And it's a particularly high note, Marlvin, for you at the moment, because of the success of Blind Ambition, we now have you raising a glass to your new role, group sommelier at the Newmark Hotels, Marlvin.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on the show.
So tell us a little bit about this new role, Marlvin, and what it entails.
Basically, I'm still new with the company, and I joined the company about a month and a half ago. The idea was to focus on the growth of wine programs within the group and try and focus on each and every property when it comes to the requirements, and obviously the menu, working very closely with the chef and see what works best with the area, as well as sorting out the distribution within certain areas. For example, like your game lodges, which we all know that it's quite a struggle to get some really stunning wines out there, but it's something that we're really looking into.
I can see the smile on your face. It's a smile we're pretty familiar with, because I think you smiled through the entire Blind Ambition, and every time I've spent time with you, there has been a big smile. It's another wonderful part of this journey that wine has given you, Marlvin. The world saw you through Blind Ambition. You've been working in wine well before that, of course. Saw through the movie, but for a Zimbabwean who grew up in a very religious family where wine was not a big thing, the places that wine has taken you through the movie, through traveling, through being a sommelier, and now through Newmark, has made for a wonderful story for you, Marlvin.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, it's been quite a journey since I started the industry just 10 years ago. And the growth and everything is just working out greatly, and getting an opportunity to travel during the shoot of Blind Ambition in 2017 and 2018, and now joining Newmark, I think it comes with a huge growth.
The film had such a big impact on you and your career. How close are the four of you? Are you on a WhatsApp group? Do you chat every week? Is it still a very close-knit quartet of Zimbabwean sommeliers?
Yes, we are very close, and we talk almost every day, and we very connected, not only because of Blind Ambition, but way before Blind Ambition. We became friends, and the World Wine Tasting Championship just came along, but we were friends already. So the WhatsApp group existed before Blind Ambition.
I'm sure it's a pretty busy group, and all the more so now that you've got a brand new role, and I'm sure you'll be seeking the occasional piece of advice from the other three. I want to chat about exactly what you'll be doing and how you run these different places as a group sommelier, but we'll come back to that in a second. I've just been looking, sitting on the table in the Dan Really Likes Wine cellar is not just a bottle of Chakalaka, but also what I think is some chorizo sausage and a whole pile of spice. Charles, thank you for a lovely gift that you sent up along with the Chakalaka, and welcome back to the show. It is great to have you here. Tell us a little bit about this wine with its eye-catching name and how it came about.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be on again. It started, I just did a bit of arithmetic here. It started 25 years ago when I moved to the Swartland and started making wine in that area. And when I tasted my first vintage, I realized that we're onto something special in a unique area with fantastic attributes to make great wine. And I always wanted to make a signature style red blend that reflects the area, the terroir. And I then planted varieties that suit the terroir, such as Carignan, Shiraz, Mourvèdre, Durif, Grenache, and Tannat. And we planted that on the farm in the Swartland. And soon after that started making a red blend that I felt best represented the DNA of the area, and was very difficult to find a name. And I said to my team, look, South Africa is an amalgam of a whole lot of different things, a lot of different people, cultures, and the relish that always added flavor to our life was Chakalaka. Why don't we just call it Chakalaka? Well, you can imagine the resistance I got, because at that stage it's associated with a cheap relish in a tin. And anyway, I managed to persuade the team, and we came up with Chakalaka. And I think it's almost our 25th anniversary of making this blend that truly represents the soul of the Swartland.
The name is eye-catching, and not just for South Africans. I remember a couple of years ago doing a food event with the Australian MasterChef judges, and George Colombaris was just so taken with the name Chakalaka and the resonance as it rolled off the tongue. Anything he found with Chakalaka, he'd buy. He got someone to teach him how to make South African Chakalaka. So it's got that, whoa, you pick it up immediately. It's got such a ring to it as a name, and it's clearly paid off. What has been the success of this wine for you in terms of getting it out to the market and proving those naysayers wrong in terms of your choice of name?
Just a matter of interest, I was in Israel recently with a bottle of Chakalaka, and in Israel, a Chakalaka is the siren or the flashing light on top of a cop car. So it's really it's quite noticeable in that area as well. The main objective here was just to find a signature wine at an affordable price that truly represents the soul of the Spice Route. And it really has found favor with so many people, because I think the winemakers, starting with Irman and now Charles, hit the nail on the head with this type of blend. As time evolves and styles evolve and people taste evolve, I think the style is becoming lighter and more elegant as we're moving forward. And that's what wine should do. It should be dynamic and represent the space that the consumers find themselves in.
And Charles, you're better placed than most to be able to make that sort of call, because you have been making wine for a fair amount of time and watching your own wine, but also the South African wine market and the interpretation of wines change over the years. We've already spoken on the show and also just beforehand about the appreciation of cool climate Syrah as but one example of how we are an industry in flux. How challenging does that make it for somebody like you as a winemaker, when yes, there are new opportunities, but you've spent so much time getting something just right, and now here's a new varietal, here's a new interpretation of the varietal, here's something else you need to do as a winemaker?
Yeah, I've been blessed it's my 45th vintage I've just had. So it's a real blessing, and to be part of the South African landscape during our transition and moving into where we are today. And I think South Africa's never been in a better space as far as winemaking is concerned. We've got a whole host of young people coming into the industry, and the dynamics of the industry has changed somewhat. Before, we had to rely on capital investments to make good wine. You had to have your own vineyard, your own winery. And today, with contract winemaking and people buying grapes all over the show, you basically just need a lot of passion, a lot of skill, a cell phone, and a bakkie, and you can make great wine. And the youngsters are already stepping up and making special stuff and finding special new sites. And that's the next thing about South Africa. We're blessed with so many different elevations and aspects and soil types that if you go out there and scratch around, you can really come up with special stuff. And that's what's happening, and that's elevating the whole industry. And internationally, I think we stand in a very good position to really extract value moving forward.
I want to find out a little more later on in the show about your expansion, because I know there are some new areas that you have been playing around with and coming up with some great wine. But tell me a little bit about the winemaker here. We've had Charles on the show before. When you've spoken about it before, it has been in very high esteem. How does the relationship work between you and your winemaker? And how much pride does it give you to see people like Charles come through under a bit of guidance from you and in their own right become great South African winemakers?
I think for me, it's always been important to be the weakest link in the chain. And this interesting thing at Fairview, we've only had, since Fairview's existed as a wine producing estate, we've only had 3 winemakers. It was my late father, myself, and Anthony de Jager, who I think is close to his 30th vintage now. And at Spice Route, which is now 25 years old, we've only had 2 winemakers, Eben Sadi, who had started, I think, the first 3 vintages, followed by Charles. And what makes Charles a very special individual is that his connection, linking up vineyards, viticultural aspects to wine is very great. His interpretation of the vintage and the understanding of terroir and viticulture. Of all the winemakers I've been involved with, he's the one that has the best grasp of viticulture. He's actually a farmer that's adding value to his grapes by making wine. So he's a very special, gifted individual, and a terrible cyclist. You can ask him about that. I beat him on a bicycle, so he's not very good at that. But winemaking, he's great at. Okay.
Well, we'll have to arrange to have him on the show next week or two, see if he counters those claims from you, Charles. The story of a great young winemaker coming through. That's exactly the story of our third guest on the show today. Morgan, lovely to have you with us and joining us. And just before we talk about the wine,
thank you, Dan.
For part of Durbanville. Tell me a little bit about the other side of the coin. We've had Charles talking about the young winemaker come through under his guidance. What about you with Charles Hopkins, who has got this wonderful and very well-deserved reputation of being one of the great mentors in South African wine?
Yeah, Dan, thank you for having me. I learned a lot from Charles Hopkins here at the Grendel. So I started at 2018 as an intern at the Grendel. The year after that, I was appointed assistant, and this year I was actually promoted to winemaker. So this was my first vintage at the Grendel as a winemaker, and I can tell you I learned from Charles every day, and I learned the most from him. And I think all the stuff that people said about him at the wine competition or the event is actually true. So I'm fortunate enough to be with him every day and learn from him every day. And that's such for me as a young winemaker, learning from him, that's something I think any winemaker can hope for.
You've been working with him, but you've also been working with the rest of your valley. And I've got a bottle here, which I remember first getting this and being both excited, but also quite bemused. Maybe, how on earth would you do this? Because you have gone to a group of winemakers across a region and decided, right, we're going to make something together. And I kind of have this vision of them all arriving in buckies with a couple of barrels of wine, tossing them all together, mix them all up, and voila, we've got a Sauvignon Blanc. I suspect it's a little more complicated than that. But how does the process work, and how did this idea for the wine come about, Morgan?
Yeah, Dan, I'm actually sitting with also with the second vintage of this wine, and the first vintage was last year. And we as a wine valley there's great camaraderie between all 13 producers of this wine. And yeah, we decided it would be better if each winery makes their own wine and then present it. So what happens is we have 13 winemakers making the wine in their wineries, and then we will get together and we will discuss the wine. We'll each bring a sample, and as you know, we have young winemakers, old winemakers. We have Martin Moore, we have Charles Hopkins, we have young winemakers like John Day from Dimmersdal and Richard from Groot Visantekal, and then there's 9 others that have input on this wine. So we'll get together, each of us will bring our sample and we'll taste this wine, and then we'll discuss it. And we'll discuss where are we working towards. And you must, then the older guys will usually come in with their opinions and tell, listen, can't we just have a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that? And then we'll make a blend, and we'll taste it afterwards, and we'll decide on how much each winery will give of that blend. So we're 13 winemakers and 13 wineries, and I think each winemaker has their own story, and that's what makes this wine special, that there's 13 stories in one bottle. And this wine is a representation of not only Durbanville, but also the teamwork that happens in Durbanville. And I think Sauvignon Blanc is the greatest way to express the Durbanville wine valley.
It is an extraordinary act of teamwork, but every team does need a captain. You are that captain for this vintage. What is your influence on the final selection? And do you have complete say? Right, this is what Morgan likes. This is what Morgan does.
Yeah, of course, that's the hard part. Telling someone that isn't there another let's say component, or can't he give us a different tank or a different batch? That's the hardest part, asking someone that. So everything goes according to plan when we taste. And so first of all, we'll taste it and blend it together, like I said. Then we'll look at analysis, and I'll get everything together. So I'll plan everything when we're driving everything in, cleaning, finding the wine, doing the fine tune on the wine, bottling it, and just making sure that like I said, this is a representation of not just, let's say, the Grendel or Diemersdal, but that this is a representation of all 13 farms. It's definitely a hard task to tell someone, listen, you must give us another sample, or don't you have another sample? But sometimes with the first try, we're lucky, and we have this blend. So we'll usually do is we'll take a bit of let's say, if I can call it 3 aromas or 3 alcohols or 3 acidities. We'll take a bit of, what we talk about is lower alcohols that will give you the grainer flavors. And then we'll take a bit in the middle, where we have your optimal ripeness, where you have your tropical fruits, and then a little bit of that overripe fruit. And then all of these will balance each other out in alcohol, acidity, and also just flavor in general.
If Morgan suddenly finds that a couple of Durbanville winemakers have unfriended him on Facebook, it hasn't quite been the smoothest of processes. You've produced a Sauvignon Blanc. I'm going to jump back to some Sauvignon Blanc with you in a moment. I would like to ask Marlvin about varietals and about the job that you do. You're fairly new into it, but you've got plenty of experience in the hospitality space as a sommelier. How challenging is it to work out what sort of wine needs to go into what sort of places, given that for you, you've got loads of international tourists coming into the Newmark Bush properties, you've got hotels in the city in Cape Town, the audience and the markets, I think, will be a little different. So how do you balance that? How do you work out what goes where?
Thanks, Jen. It's quite interesting question, because if you look at each property, is very different. We've got city hotels, coastal hotels, as well as game lodges. So they all have got different interpretation. The menus are different. As you know, South African wine has grown over the past 10 years, because the chefs, they travel a lot, as well as the guests, they travel a lot as well. So as the winemakers. So the winemaking technique has changed over the past 10 years. So that has given me a chance to have a huge spectrum of style of wines to work with. So what we do is we sit with the chef and the team at each property. Then we look at the kind of clientele we receive, or the kind of guests we receive in each property, and the kind of menu that we introduce, and that will definitely have a huge impact as to the kind of wines we are likely to lean towards. Looking at the bush, for example, we will be looking towards the richer styles of red wines versus the city hotels that are much more diverse. So there's a little bit of balance of where the property is located, as well as what kind of clientele you receive in those kind of properties. But for now, we've been really working hard and trying to get different wines into different properties, and introduction of new varietals, introduction of new styles as well in the market.
The challenge of working out what to put in is, I suppose, enhanced a bit by the fact that for your international guests, there are many of them who just won't know the areas, let alone know the individual wine estates. So, what's the education process like with your team? How are you introducing people who've come from different parts of the world to South African wine, knowing that they probably like wine, they can certainly afford wine if they're staying at a top South African lodge, but maybe don't know they don't know the Swartland, let alone know what a Charles Back is, or don't know Durbanville, let alone what a Grendel is. How do you manage that?
So all the vacations, we take them as educational vacations. That's why we do offer wine tastings in some of the properties where we can educate all the guests that comes through to say, hey, welcome to South Africa. This is what it's all about. This is the kind of menu we have, as well as is the kind of wines that are being made in South Africa. It's really pointless to come to South Africa and you're drinking the wines from your country. So the point is for you to come to South Africa and drink South African wines. So we use it as educational vacation where you come, you relax, we take you through the journey of South African wines.
It's a wonderful opportunity to be able to show South African wine to the world. Charles, that's something you have been doing for some time now, and showing different parts, because of late, if I'm not mistaken, there's been a bit of a Charles Back West Coast invasion, particularly around the Darling area. You seem to have discovered some terroir that you firmly believe is going to add a rich dimension to South African wine. Sorry, Charles there.
For me or not?
That's for you, Charles, yes.
Okay. Obviously, when I went into the Swartland, and what ensued afterwards was quite a revolution, as they called it then. And that's only one of the areas that sort of undiscovered, under exploited in South Africa. We then moved to Pekanieskloof from there. And I just recently had some stunning wines in our portfolio from Pekanieskloof. The altitude there is 750 meters above sea level, has a dramatic impact on the quality of the wine. And then the old vineyard program that Rosa has done so well is starting to bear fruit at the moment. So that's a great area. And then an area that I've been involved in for quite a number of years is Darling. I have 150 hectares overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. And Darling is really, as those vineyards have matured, producing stunning wines. It's due to the locality close to the Atlantic and the high quality of soil that you have on those hills overlooking the Atlantic. And we're busy at the moment trying to procure more vineyards there. And I see a lot of excitement coming out of that region in the next couple of vintages.
Is this a case of climate shifting slightly, styles of wine shifting slightly, that this has now become an area that is worth exploring? Or is it somewhere we just hadn't thought to have a look at properly from a wine perspective before this?
No, I think Darling has been discovered, like the Swartland was discovered before I got there. Neil Ellis has been working in Darling for a long time. And then, of course, the Pences of Grootepost and others are doing great work in Darling. I just think it is the global warming is having an impact. And you find that additional areas are becoming increasingly warmer, sugar contents are rising. And therefore, the coastal, cooler regions such as Walker Bay and Darling are more sought after. As you can see, the recent Shiraz tasting going down as far as Elam, Cape Agulhas, that's how far one has to push the envelope to get to those cooler regions. And then, of course, styles are changing. People want less alcoholic wines, and quite rightly so. And then the varietal portfolio is also shifting. You can take the resurgence or the growth of Grenache, and Cinsault is indicative of what's happening in the marketplace.
There's almost a contradiction in terms of where we are with wine, based on that, Charles, and that you're looking to put in new vineyards, to explore new areas, and yet probably we don't go a week without hearing of a vineyard somewhere else that's being pulled out as owners are looking for a crop or a fruit that'll be a little more reliable or will deliver them something else. What does that say about our South African wine industry at the moment?
The big challenge is you always, let's take an area like Picaniscliff, let's use a practical example. When you buy grapes in that area, you're competing not against other grape buyers, you're competing against rooibos tea and citrus. And it's not profitable really for a grape grower if he's not adding value. So I think top-end wines in South Africa will have to become more expensive to cover the cost across the whole value chain. So that's the one thing that's definitely going to happen, and we can expect prices to rise as quality improves moving forward.
The wine of the Swartland being showcased in this particular bottle, the Chakalaka, one of the two bottles. And the other one, of course, is the Durbanville Sauvignon Blanc. Morgan, the Sauvignon Blanc story, it's a wine that is not everybody's favorite. It's a wine that I think gets unfairly a bit of a knock from time to time, yet it is still our most drunk white wine, and I think particularly in the hands of people like yourself, it's one of our best made white wines. How have you, in your time as a winemaker, seen the Sauvignon Blanc story develop and the style of Sauvignon Blanc that you guys are giving us out of de Grendel develop along the way?
Yeah, Dan, like you said, Sauvignon Blanc is actually one of the most consumed varieties in South Africa. And it's also now, from I think end of last year, the second most planted variety in South Africa. So Sauvignon Blanc is actually growing, and that's actually a good thing for us and for the Durbanville region. But Sauvignon Blanc is a diverse variety. I always tell people that some people just love certain styles, and other styles you can make it in numerous styles. You can go from these tropical Sauvignon Blancs to the more Methoxypyrazines, what we call the more greener style of Sauvignon Blanc. You can even make Noble Late Harvest these days of Sauvignon Blanc. And then also wooded, then you've seen natural made Sauvignon Blanc that's fermented on skins. So Sauvignon Blanc is a diverse variety, and working at the Grendel with it, I came to realize that you can make it in different styles, Sauvignon Blanc. And like this wine, we try to showcase that different styles of Sauvignon Blanc. But yeah, like, Durbanville isn't only known for Sauvignon Blanc these days. You can even make Shiraz, Merlots, and actually Cabernet Sauvignon is the second most planted variety in the Durbanville region, with Sauvignon Blanc obviously first.
Well, let's talk a little bit about those other varieties, and especially about the red wines. The success of Sauvignon Blanc in Durbanville is such that a lot of the other varietals, and especially the reds, do fall into the shadows somewhat. And yet there are such terrific red wines made. If we go back to arguably South Africa's greatest wine, the GS66, and the intrigue and mystique which shrouds it, we know that came from Durbanville. Give us a sense of the red wines of Durbanville and why we'd be wrong not to pay them attention and try them out.
Yeah, Dan, you must come visit us more in Durbanville so that we can actually show you. But I think there's a lot of varieties that sometimes surprises people, and I think I tell people not to put Durbanville in a box. And I think with Christian Eats, with the winemaker competition, it actually showed that varieties like Shiraz thrives in Durbanville. And if you go look back at some, not only competitions, but taste the wine itself, you'll see that Merlot also does good. I think if your viticultural practices are good in Durbanville, Merlot thrives, the Merlot wine, and also Cabernet Sauvignon. And I think with weather and like Charles said, now with global warming now, other varieties are going to start thriving in Durbanville. So we have to look at planting other varieties. And there's also varieties like Pinotage, what we call more cool climate Pinotage, and that does good in Durbanville. And Dimmersdal with a Cabernet Sauvignon, that's also good in Durbanville. So there's a lot of red varieties that are actually thriving and doing good in Durbanville. And as I say, sometimes you just have to maybe manipulate viticultural practices, then and choose maybe specific sites to plant these varieties on, and then you can actually plant any variety in Durbanville.
And the results are definitely there to be seen. And again, just a reminder of those successes for Grendel with the Syrah coming out of the prescient report with Wine Mag. Marlvin, what about for you from the other end of the business, the guys selling the wine, the guys interacting day to day with the consumers, buying the wine and then drinking it with dinner and staying in your different properties? Have you seen over the last years a shift in what people are wanting to drink, about what's more appealing and what's perhaps a little less so for our consumers?
Yes, for the past, I would probably say a year or so, and there's been a growth of wooded Sauvignon Blancs. And I think a lot of people, they're still really enjoying that fresh approach of Sauvignon Blanc on the nose as well as the palate, but they still want to have that palate weight. I think the Blanc families are just growing, and when it comes to restaurants, they're much more food friendly and they're much more versatile when it comes to pairing. So I think the approach of wooded Sauvignon Blanc is a huge growth there, and there's a demand as well as old vine chainings, and it's such a stunning project, and I think the growth of it is just on another level. And I see most of the wine lists now, we tend to go towards listing old vines on their own page or on their own categories. It's our own interpretation in South Africa to say this is something new that has never been done elsewhere, and this is our own interpretation. And I think there's a youth growth around that as well.
I can hear Andre Morgendahl and Rosa Clear smiling wherever they are at the moment, hearing that old vine endorsement. It is such a great part of our wine narrative, and I love that people like Marlvin are supporting it. What about, Marlvin, the challenge of when you're putting together, creating these wine lists for a luxury lodge, of which you have several, for the hotels, of going, right, this is wine Marlvin really likes, but maybe I need to put in something else that more people will like because the wine I like might be quite specialist. Is that a challenge for you?
Yes and no. I think access to wines in the game lodges is a challenging part, because there's certain ones you can find and there's some you can't. And should you try and get it direct, then it would take longer than expected. But it's something that we're really working towards in Newmark, and try and centralize everything. Then we can do our own distribution centrally, and to try and get ones that we can only find in that region. I think we're trying to spread out and have more options around all our lodges.
And in particular, if I look at, I think it's the Batoy, is it the Batoy Lodge, the really luxury one? You've got a dedicated wine cellar there. I think that would be the most fun part of the job, because here you are as a sommelier, you've got an open slate. Right, let's put the wine together. Let's just create this amazing cellar. You start from scratch. For a sommelier, for somebody in the wine industry, that's kid in a toy store stuff, Marlvin.
Yeah, it is indeed. Putting one list together or stocking up a cellar, it's actually a little more complicated than that. There's certain areas you need to look at. You need to look at access. You need to look at vintage movement. You need to look at price points, and as well as the kind of clientele you're likely to receive in that property. So it might look as if you can just stock up the wines, but you have to balance it out as to the styles as well.
That's I think it. How do I pronounce it, Marlvin? Is it Baboy? Baboy?
Baboy.
Baboy. And very quickly, just tell me a little bit about the lodge, because it looks amazing.
Yeah. So Baboy is one of our newest lodge in Kwabi. So Kwabi is located in Limpopo, and it's probably one of the few luxurious lodges that opened 2 days ago, soft opening, and it's beautiful. And on another level, stocking up that cellar was probably one of the best feeling I've ever had in a long time, where you just stand up in the cellar and look at all the stunning wines that have been stocked up there and ready for the guests to walk in.
I think I need to put a visit up there with you, Marlvin, onto my list of things to do. It sounds terrific. So much wine to try, so much wine to sample and to appraise. What about fit for you, Charles, during the course of a regular week? Is it mostly Spice Route and Fairview wine, or is there, as I suspect, a very broad cellar that you dip into and try stuff from all over the place?
I think it's very important, especially in South Africa, where we're quite removed from the international wine growing regions other than our own, is to taste regularly as much as you possibly can from everywhere possible. You learn from any area in the world. You learn, like when I tasted Georgian wines from Georgia, former state of Russia. And from there, we went into importing the clay pots and quevries. And if it wasn't for me tasting those wines, I would never have started producing natural wines in South Africa. And if I look ahead in my office, there's a whole table full of Russian wines that are available for me to taste at the moment, made from different varieties that we never even ever heard of. So tasting regularly and interacting with other winemakers in other regions is vitally important, especially in South Africa, where we're so isolated.
It also allows you to discover some slightly different techniques. I assume it was that sense of adventure that brought the Kverties, and I apologize for my pronunciation, into play in your winemaking process, Charles.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to take a visit to Georgia after I tasted the wine. And incidentally, Georgia is the oldest wine producing country in the world, 8,000 years of winemaking. And their traditional way of making wine is simply dumping grapes into a clay pot that's buried in the earth. We managed to bring 20 of these clay pots to the Swartland and bury them in Swartland terroir. And then for the last 4 years, embarked upon making natural wine from organically grown grapes in the Swartland. And I think the Swartland ideally lends itself to making this ever-increasingly popular style of wine.
And I think you've, in a roundabout way, answered the other question I really wanted to ask you today. You mentioned your 45th vintage, this sense of constant change, of always being something new and different to taste, to explore, to make, to find in the world of wine. Would that be at the heart of what's kept Charles back, not just going for 45 vintages, but going so enthusiastically and, needless to say, so successfully?
No, I haven't cracked it yet because I must still get a listing from Marlvin. I'm working very hard. That's my objective at the moment. And I think Chuck, if I listen to the problems he's got in his lodges with overseas visitors, I think Chakalaka is the ideal listing. He's got a nice story to tell, great South African name, and a great blend. So, Marlvin, we have to get together after the show for sure. What keeps me going really is the young team I've got around me. They energize me and keep me going and to stay relevant. The minute that I'm not relevant anymore, I'm the first one to walk into the sunset. So to stay relevant and to be relevant, you have to keep up with ideas. And I think I have a benefit of being in cheese and wine, because cheese from a technological perspective is about a decade ahead of wine. And wine is about a decade ahead of cheese in marketing. So these two things feed off each other the whole time, and that really does keep my mind challenged and keeps me occupied and keeps the creative juices flowing.
And has led to such an extraordinary career. Let's see if our network on Dan Really Likes Wine does pay off and jump back to Marlvin. Marlvin, can we get Charles to send you some chakalaka for your tasting to see if it's fit for the lodgers?
Yes, I would love to try some of this.
All right, Charles, we'll connect you guys after the show and get that made. We've got a young winemaker in Morgan on the show, Charles, who is in very much the early stages of already an extremely exciting career, making some terrific wine, as we're seeing today. If you look back over your rolling career in the wine industry, what's the piece of advice that you would give Morgan early on in his career that's really helped you to get you to where you are today?
I think wine or Korean wine is like a test match in cricket. Or those hard overs that you can't get a wicket and it's boiling hot and you're just plugging away, bowling over after over and you're not getting a wicket. Don't give up. Just continue, stick line and length, and you never know what happens. The ball's going to bounce, hit a divot, and you're going to get the one wicket. And once you get one, the rest seem to tumble down in sequence. So stick at it and keep bowling those long, hard overs.
I love the cricket analogy. Morgan, what do you make of that? Does that reflect a lot of the career so far? Lots of high points, but the occasional tough period as well?
Yeah, Dan, I think Charles is spot on. I'm actually about to read a book of, I think it's Penfolds, the reward of patience. And I think that's important, and I learn it in my life every day, is that you just need to be patient, and the breakthrough will come. Our hard work will pay off at the end of the day.
I think it is already paying off, and you might not have Charles back by your side, but you do have Charles Hopkins, who has been such a terrific mentor for you. And at the lunch we had last week with Wine Magazine, I think 4 or 5 people referenced the impact that Charles had on them. What is it about Charles Hopkins that seems to have him just so well placed to help people, to nurture them, to get them not just into the wine industry, but to do so with such a comforting arm around them, it seems?
Yeah, then Charles really has a love for young people and teaching young people, and and the same with me. He loves teaching me new stuff, and I think his timing with what he teaches you and when he teaches you is also important. I think Charles is also an open book. You can actually phone him any time of the day, or he likes to do WhatsApp. You can WhatsApp him any time of the day and ask him. And I know that a lot of people, especially young people, seek for advice from him. And he's, like I said, he's always open and willing to help younger people.
You've got some great advice from him. I'm going to get some final advice from you before we wrap up in a second. And I'm looking at the wine, and I'm looking beyond it at the Sauvignon Blanc section of the Dan Really Likes Wine cellar. And I think of one of the great crimes that is committed in Johannesburg on a regular basis. And I use Johannesburg very deliberately because I see it time and again. It's a 2022 Sauvignon Blanc. Don't you have a 2023 for us? People love drinking wine far too young in my mind for Sauvignon Blanc. What for this wine in particular, but just generally for the better made Sauvignon Blancs, what should we be doing in terms of hanging on to them a little longer, keeping them to get the best out of them, in your opinion, Morgan?
Dan, I love to see people's faces when I give them an older Sauvignon Blanc. So my party trick is always to take out an older Sauvignon Blanc and show people the freshness that older Sauvignon Blancs can have, and the ageability of Sauvignon Blanc. With this wine specific, you can enjoy this young. I know some people love to enjoy this young, but this wine has a nice fresh acidity. It has a nice palate. So I think this one you can still keep for another 5 years and still open it and see its development over time. This one will just get better with time. And I think we should always teach people that Sauvignon Blanc doesn't need to be drunk young. I think you can age it, especially wooded Sauvignon Blancs or Sauvignon Blancs with nice and fresh acidities. That's just my piece of advice for Sauvignon Blanc and drinking it.
I shall do my best to hang on to it for the next 5 years. Just in closing with you, Morgan, this is clearly a rolling project. This is the second vintage. Do you make this again next year, or do you pass the baton on to somebody else?
Yeah, so the 2022 vintage, we did it, and the 2023 vintage too. So I think we'll pass the baton over to the next winery next year. Also with helping them and giving them advice what to do and when to do it. I think I would love to see who's taking it over. So we will probably discuss that later in the year. We will do the next Durbanville Wine Valley Sauvignon Blanc.
We look forward to speaking to whoever that is and seeing if they can successfully follow in the footsteps of Morgan. Charles, as we wrap up with you, 45 vintages done. I know that you'll have completed the career when you get that listing with Marlvin. But what else is there still to do? Is there still something in particular that Charles Back hasn't done? And I can't imagine what it would be that you'd still like to tick off.
I think to make enough money to retire. I think that'll be the thing I have to. But the load shedding has put a bit of a spanner in the works. No, I really want to make Fairview and Spice Route the destination next door, iconic tourist destination in the world for people coming here for great experience, great wine, great cheese, and great service, and move away with a lot of extra knowledge about South African wine. I think that's what I want to do. Please as many people as I possibly can.
Well, I think there's already a long list in place there. I'm certainly on it, as is George Calombaris, the master chef from Australia, Chakalaka. I need to send him some of this wine. Marlvin, just to close up the show, as we congratulate you on this new role. You've got a lot of work to do. There have been a couple of lodges opening recently, but there is also a new project on the cards. Harsendal, October, luxury hotel, beautiful estate, making some really cool wine. I've got no doubt you will have a hand in that project. Tell us a little bit about what is in store for Harsendal and Newmark in October.
Oh, I'm very excited about that project. We've got a great chef there. We've got amazing chef at Harsendal. So when we're really working hand to hand to try and get some of the best pairings on the menu before the opening. So the idea is around having degustation menu, focus pairing, as well as accommodating those ones who wants to opt for a la carte menu. But look out for us, and it's going to be magnificent.
And speaking of chefs, finally, did I see Chris Erasmus has also joined the group?
That's correct. Yeah, we work together side by side, me and Chris Schiff. And Chef Chris, he's the curator of food and beverage within the group. So it's great to have a mentor like him as well,
It makes for a formidable team. Marlvin handling the wine, Chris handling the food. I think Newmark's in a pretty good space when it comes to food and wine. So too, as we see every week on this show, is South Africa. Not just extraordinary wine, but extraordinary people behind it, whether it is somebody like Marlvin who's serving that wine and curating it and ensuring that we get the very best and that our visitors see the very best. Young and exciting talent like Morgan, or people like Charles, who, as I said at the start of the show, just a national treasure when it comes to South African wine, and still producing, along with Charles, some really, really cool wine. Might not be a great cyclist, but he is a great winemaker. Guys, to all three of you, thank you so much for being part of the show this evening. This wine is not going to last long. We need to get some Chakalaka, Charles, off to Marlvin, and we need to get some Chakalaka off to George Calombaris, and I think we need to get some of your Sauvignon Blanc Morgan off to Marlvin as well, to fill up those cellars of his. Guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time, and look forward to having you all back on the show again soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, there we go. Marlvin Gwese. You'll know him from the Blind Ambition documentary, which was such a success. But also, if you've been in any of the Newmark properties, especially the new lodges, you'll have seen his trademark, if not he himself, along with Morgan Steyn, the man behind the brand new collaborative Sauvignon Blanc out of Durbanville. Such a cool idea, and lovely to see the winemakers working together. And Charles Back, you don't really need to say much about, just part of the backbone of the South African wine industry. 45 vintages and counting, certainly not done yet. We are done though. That is us for today. A little later on in the week, I will be coming to you from a winery in Italy as I sample some of the wine of the Amalfi Coast region and Campania, and a check-in from there. Don't forget to join us if you can, if you're in London next week, Tuesday, for the Dan Really Likes Wine charity dinner with the Nickel Foundation, and that's in support of the Laureus Sport for Good Foundation, we'd love to have you along. Some great South African wine there. And remember, if you're shopping this month at Norman Goodfellows, online or in store, or on the Dan Really Likes Wine store, buy any bottle of wine from Haut Cabrières, including the new Reserve range, and you'll go into a draw, a 15,000 Rand dining experience in Durban, Cape Town, or Johannesburg could be yours. That's us for today. Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. See you again on Thursday. Goodbye.